Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Exclusive Networks webinar, and welcome to Season 4 of our TGIF series. My name is Chris Panaris, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Exclusive Networks. On today's episode, we will teach you everything you need to know about how you can help your customers manage access points and switches while pushing security out to every corner of the network, all in one easy-to-produce and deploy bundle. Like always, I want to take a couple minutes to inform any first-timers joining us today about how Exclusive Networks can add value to your business. We are the value-added distributor for cyber and cloud security. We have over 62 offices worldwide and the capability to handle international deals and logistics. We offer pre-configuration and staging services. We're Fortinet's #1 global distributor, and we offer rapid turnaround on quotes. You get direct access to account management and support resources, such as myself, and you always get to speak to a real person here at Exclusive Networks. A little bit more about what we offer. So we offer some technical marketing and sales support across the globe, assistance with building qualified leads and closing deals, certification training in group and individual scenarios, a range of financing and leasing services to cover a variety of IT project requirements and technologies. And we have a growing list of vendor partners chosen specifically to integrate with each other. And we'll show you exactly who our vendors are at the end of this presentation. A little bit more about our support and services. We offer pre and post sales support, security tools migration, security tools jumpstart services, staging services, vulnerability testing services, and cloud competency training, to name some of them. Our speaker today is none other than our very own Juan Quintero. He is one of our sales engineers here at Exclusive Networks, and he is based out of our sales office in beautiful Miami, Florida. Now it's time to get to the reason why you are all here. Juan, the floor is all yours, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this first episode of Season 4 of TGIF. Today, we're gonna talk about the Fortinet Fabric components that you would need for a secure branch deployment. So we're gonna focus on anywhere from shoestring deployments that usually include a very small FortiGate model, all the way to those bigger branches where you have 100F, few switches, access points, high availability, all of that. So we're going to talk about the components themselves, the features, advantages, disadvantages, flexibility of the different ways to configure these secure branch bundles. We're going to talk about the integration between FortiGate, FortiSwitch, FortiAP, how that's going to really help you guys offer enterprise level security to those small businesses that, they want it, but maybe you guys don't know that they can get it. They don't know that they can get it. They don't know maybe that they can afford it. And we're going to talk about a little bit about hardware as a service and the affordability of deployments such as the ones that we're going to discuss today. Before I get started, I do want to hit on a couple points from what Chris talked about. And number one is from the support services, we offer pre-configuration services, and we offer staging services out of our warehouse in San Jose, which is about 10 minutes away from the Fortinet headquarters. So hopefully, you guys knew that. If you didn't, now you do. If you are thinking about hardware as a service, embracing hardware as a service, and offering that to your customers, and you've kind of, one of the, obstacles that you may encounter is, how do you stage and perhaps maybe pre-configure some of those things before you ship them out to your customers? Well, we can definitely help you with that. We're doing it for a lot of our partners. So if we're not doing it for you and you're interested, that's something that we can certainly talk about. So moving on to the different bundle options that we're going to talk about, I kind of made this little chart. And this is kind of my interpretation of the three aspects of each of the 5 options that I want to talk about today. So we have convenience in blue, and convenience is really all about being able to access the network from anywhere. So convenience is directly tied to wireless access. Then you have flexibility in brown, and that is about basically how many models you have of the bundle is what gives each of the bundles a higher or lower flexibility score. And then obviously security in red. As you can see, all the options have very high security marks. You know, the FortiGate is a firewall. So it's also a bunch of other things, but it's a firewall and it's a very good one. When I think about security, I think about your ability to segmentate your network the way that you want, your ability to authenticate devices and users, and then for whatever traffic you're allowing to traverse the network, your ability to inspect that traffic in a number of different ways. And the FortiGate does all that very well. So if you're not familiar with the icons, the red, this one right here, this represents a FortiGate. This is a FortiGate with a FortiSwitch. This is a FortiWi-Fi, which is the FortiGate that has wireless antennas. This is a FortiGate with a dedicated access point. This is a FortiGate with a FortiSwitch and a dedicated access point. And of course, these little coins here indicate kind of the value, the cost comparison between the bundles. So this would be the cheapest one. This one will be a little bit more expensive. This one is more expensive than option number 1, but a little bit cheaper than option number 2. And option number 2 and 4 are kind of similar in price depending on the models. And then obviously option number 5 is the more expensive. When it comes to convenience, as you can see, the first 2 options have a lower convenience score, and that's simply because they don't really offer Wi-Fi. Or if you're gonna have Wi-Fi in those options, it's gonna be a wireless access point from another vendor with which Fortinet or the FortiGate cannot integrate. So you can't really push the security all the way to the access layer in the way that you would be able to if you had a FortiAP. And then in bundle number 3, you're gonna see that the flexibility is a little lower. And that is simply because the FortiWi-Fi to me, you know, when I first joined Exclusive and I started looking through the different FortiGate models, I was really excited about the FortiWi-Fi. But then I found that there was only a couple of models that were offered. So essentially right now, there's a 30 that has a FortiWi-Fi model, there's a 50, and then there's a 60. So I wish that there were more FortiWi-Fi models. I understand why there's not, because then Fortinet would be kind of cannibalizing its sales of the other fabric components. But I am very excited about the new FortiF, because according to the data sheet, there's going to be a Wi-Fi version of the new FortiF. And we're going to look at some overview numbers for performance. The new FortiF has really good performance numbers. And if there is a Wi-Fi version, it's going to basically allow you to expand the ability of that FortiWi-Fi offering, where you have that all-in-one appliance that gives you the firewall protection and gives you the convenience of Wi-Fi. Also keep in mind that most of these FortiWi-Fi models, they offer one radio only. Right now there's one exception, which is the 50 model. But when you have only one radio, it's kind of like the radio in your car. You can only listen to FM or AM. You can't listen to both at the same time. When you have a dedicated AP, usually you have dual radio, tri-radio, so you can have multiple frequencies going at the same time. All right, so the FortiGate is the backbone of the fabric. It's a security appliance, it's a router, it's a switch controller, and it is an access point controller. Now, these are the numbers for the models that when I talk about secure branch deployments, these are the models that you guys should be thinking about. Anywhere from the 30E up to this 100F. Usually any bigger than that, and you're looking at an enterprise environment, probably an IT closet, small data center, medium, big, distributor infrastructure. So those are going to be outside of the scope of today's episode. But these are the models that I kind of want to focus on and bring your attention to for branch deployments, and particularly to the brand new F series and to the 40F, which is the newest member, as well as the 60F, which came out earlier this year. And of course, the 100F has been around for a couple of months now, and that's going to be the one that we're going to be looking at predominantly in our demo, which we will have a little bit of demo at the end of this episode, like we always do. Okay, so segmentation, which I consider to be the first line of defense. Segmentation requires no licensing. Segmentation means that you're able to break apart the interfaces of a FortiGate and divide that internal network, and therefore limit the ability for users to be able to communicate with one another if they don't have to. And I kind of drew this little graphic here for a small deployment. So you can think of this as a small office. So like a tax law firm or small law firm, or a small dental office where they have just a few users, and then maybe they have a network attached storage, and they have a small voice over IP system. And so with FortiGate, because of your ability to customize all the interfaces, then you can really and granularly set policies that allow only the specific access that users need. So if Bob and Ann, they need to share resources and they need to speak to one another, that's fine. But if they don't need to speak to the admin department, then they shouldn't be allowed to. And when it comes to access to the file storage, that also should be limited, and as well as access to any VoIP system. And if there is a printer, for example, for the office, that access should be limited as well. And what you're doing with this is essentially, if there is a compromise somewhere, you are limiting the ability for the fire to just spread everywhere when you segmentate your network. Segmentation is a two-step process in FortiGate. Essentially, step number one, you need to configure your interfaces. And I kind of have this graphic here. This is a 100F internal port breakdown. And this is for example purposes only. Normally, when you first take it out of the box, you have this LAN interface, which is a hardware switch, which means that you now have a FortiGate, which is able to make routing decisions, and you have an internal switch. This switch usually contains all the ports, but, and we're going to see how to do this later on, you can take any ports out of this interface and then create separate interfaces and break down those ports any way you want to. And then finally, you can have individual ports that can be for something specific. Step number two is you create policies. So for those interfaces that I created in the previous slide, you create policies for each of them. If they need to be protected in different ways, you would do that through the source, destination, the schedule, the services, as well as the security policies. Now, the security policies represent the licenses that you're going to buy with your UTM enterprise bundles. And that is what allows you to inspect the traffic that you're going to allow to traverse your network. I do want to talk a little bit about policies with multiple interfaces. So the FortiGate allows you to create policies with multiple interfaces. And that's fine if you're sure that you want all of that to be inspected in the same way. But the minute you don't, then, the changes become more cumbersome. So I would encourage people to create separate policies for different interfaces. And we're going to see how to kind of do that. If you already have policies with multiple interfaces, there is a very simple copy and paste, and then you can make changes to that so that you can get those interfaces separate. All right, so adding convenience. So convenience is a very big deal. And when I think about convenience, I think about Wi-Fi. People want to be able to connect wireless, and they want to be able to roam around freely around the office, go from their desk to the conference room, to a meeting, back to their desk. And obviously with Wi-Fi, you're able to do that without having to plug into any cables. The problem with that usually is that with a lot of access points, you may have quality of service options or features. You don't have a lot of security features. And what I mean by security features is the ability to lock down users either through device authentication or user group authentication. So you don't know what's going on. You're not able to really lock down intra SSID traffic. And by the way, with Fortinet, there is a button that you just toggle on that accomplishes that, so that those users that are on the same SSID, they're not going to be able to talk to one another. So there's two ways that you can add convenience with FortiGate. You can do so with a FortiWi-Fi model. Again, please keep in mind that with a FortiWi-Fi model, you have one radio. So you have to make the choice. Do I want to have 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi? Do I want to have 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi? Or the more flexible option is by having a FortiGate and adding a dedicated access point to that. To manage in either case, you are going to go under the menu, under FortiWi-Fi and switch controller, and then it would either be local radio or manage FortiAP. So the FortiWi-Fi. FortiWi-Fi is kind of like an all-in-one device because you have a firewall, a router, a switch, and the switch is comprised of the internal interfaces and is configurable. So you can have multiple switches or just one switch. And then you have your wireless antenna. And in this particular scenario, this is my home environment. So as you can see here, I have a FortiWi-Fi 6E, and I think if I have time, I'll show you guys that a little bit. I have 3 different SSIDs in this environment. I have the Fortinet Wi-Fi, which is a 2.4 gigahertz frequency. That's for all the IoT. Then I have my wife's, she has her own Wi-Fi because my wife likes to write her password everywhere. So she gets her own Wi-Fi. And then I have my Wi-Fi, which is Wi-Fi number 5. And all those SSIDs are assigned to the different FortiAP or local antenna of the FortiWi-Fi. And I'll kind of show you how that works. And then another thing that I kind of want to talk about is when you are setting up your interfaces, you are able to, and you kind of see that down here. One of the ways you can lock down who's connected to the Wi-Fi is through MAC address authentication. So here under the DHCP server, down here, there is an implicit rule that normally is set to assign IP, but you can change that so that the interface will not assign an IP to a MAC address that it doesn't know. And then you can go a step further and reserve IPs for the devices. Now, normally this is, you see this more on wired networks, but because businesses want convenience and they're moving a lot to wireless, you want to still be able to do this on a wireless network, and you can. So the other option would be still an all-in-one option. The only difference is that you have a FortiGate and a FortiAP that still become one when you integrate them, Physically, the difference is that, the AP is dedicated, is usually circular, and you have to plug an Ethernet cable between the AP and the firewall. That's the only difference. You're still gonna have to configure profile, interface, and a policy. Now, the first two things are not necessarily in that order. Usually the policy is the last thing. So when you plug in a FortiIP to one of the ports in a FortiGate, you're gonna get a pop-up on your FortiGate GUI to authorize it. And then once you do that, you can start configuring your AP features and SSIDs and profiles from the FortiGate. So convenience is key, right? But your ability to offer that convenience in a secure fashion, it's, I guess, the message that I'm trying to drive home today. It's your ability to offer those smaller businesses enterprise level security features without them having to spend enterprise level dollars. And we're going to talk about some of the pricing later. But if you have a network that is wired, you want to be able to segmentate that network using VLANs to separate user groups, to separate devices. We're also going to take a look at quarantine VLANs and automated security. If you have a wireless network, same thing. You want to be able to separate SSIDs. You want to be able to separate devices, authenticate devices using device address, authenticate users using user groups. Also, for retail customers, you can use your Wi-Fi as a way to advertise your business. So retail users they want to attract people by any way they can. And one way that you can attract people is through offering guest Wi-Fi, where in the captive portal, you have an advertisement about your sales of the day. Or you can have a captive portal where you're collecting email addresses, and then you're using those email addresses in your advertising to send ads to those people who connected to your Wi-Fi. Additionally to that, through the FortiCloud, and that's kind of a little bit outside the scope of today's episode, but Fortinet is now offering FortiPresence Lite. And FortiPresence is a really good tool for retail customers. So think about if you have a store and you have various APs in your store, you can go into FortiPresence and kind of look at based on throughout the day, based on what AP people are connected to, what are the areas of your store that are getting the most attention. So let's say that the area of your store that's getting the most attention is the back, because you have certain products there and you want to increase exposure. Well, you take that rack in the back with the fancy socks and you put it in the front next to the glass so the people walking through can see it from the outside. So those are ways that, from a business perspective, you can bring attention to Fortinet's products by highlighting the business advantages of the features that you can get with the Fortinet. So convenience is key, but access must be restricted. So there's two ways that I kind of want to talk about how you can do that. One is to addresses, and the other one is to users. Now, normally in a bigger deployment, you will be pulling users from something like Active Directory or some other identity management external source. But even in smaller deployments where the customer doesn't have that, you can still create users and user groups in the FortiGate that can be used for a multitude of things like different VPN access levels, as well as restrictions on who can access the network through the different interfaces. And we're going to look at that in the demo portion. All right, so Fortinet Pocket Enterprise Network and Security, that's kind of the point that I want to drive home today. It's enterprise level security and connectivity at a not enterprise level cost. So a lot of these FortiGates and FortiSwitches, they have fiber interfaces. So for those businesses who want to be able to share content, so those people who are doing video or sound editing, application development, they're sharing large files, you know, you can get models of FortiGate and FortiSwitch that can allow you to transfer, you know, really fast transfer speeds. The FortiGate secure branch option is really scalable. So because the FortiGate is a switch controller and an AP controller, you can simply grow, and by grow I mean add 40 switches and add 40 APs. And once you connect them, they're going to show up in the GUI, you authenticate them, and automatically they become part of the bundle of the environment. And take advantage of the easy buttons when you can. And there's a couple of easy buttons that I want to talk about, and we'll see that later, for restricting intra SSID traffic. And the other one is for restricting access on switch VLANs. So think about ladder of movement, think about protection from ransomware, think about containing the fire so it doesn't spread. Another thing is automated security, right? So Fortinet has these automation stitches, and one of the more popular ones is the compromise host. So essentially you have triggers and actions. So compromise host is the trigger, and then the action is you get an email, the administrator, whoever that may be, and then the other two options here are access layer quarantine. And if you were paying attention on some of the previous slides with the interface graphics, you saw that they were these quarantine VLANs, and you may have seen also a quarantine soft switch that had multiple VLANs in there. That's what this is for. So if any of the Fortinet fabric branch components senses a compromised host, they can quarantine the asset to a VLAN where if you don't have a policy, they are not even going to be able to get out to the internet. They're just stuck there. So they can't talk to anybody. They can't access anything until the administrator investigates what's going on. And then obviously the other option is for those assets when they are not connected to the network, if you do have FortiClient deployed, you can quarantine the asset in that way. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this episode. I have another episode where I integrate EMS, Endpoint Management Server, FortiClient, and FortiSandbox. So I will talk more about that in that episode. Yeah, right. So yeah, if you have a pharmacy or something like that as your customer, they go to log into their Wi-Fi and they see some kind of advertisement about, you know, about what's going on in that pharmacy, the sales, the special, whatever it may be, right? To drive business. And yes, you can use automation to shut down interfaces. I think I still have one, and I have it turned off, but I think it's still there, hopefully. And then I'll show you. The way that you do that is through a CLI script. So you go on the CLI, you put in the script as if you were doing it manually, you copy, and then you paste it. So that could be your action on that trigger. However, if you're worried about that asset being able to move laterally, I'm going to show you how through the quarantine VLAN, you're not really going to have to shut down the port. You can if you want to, but since they're going to be moved to a quarantine VLAN, they're not going anywhere. So, you know, we'll see that. Okay, so visibility and management, do it from anywhere. So obviously with your UTM and enterprise bundles, you are going to get FortiCloud. FortiCloud allows you to, number one, manage your FortiGate in the same way that you would do it from the GUI, but from anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection. Secondly, there is an RDP session icon there that actually takes you to the GUI. And then finally, from a reporting perspective, you have all those reports in the bottom right. We're going to have a quick glance at some of them later on that you can send to yourself and to your customers. so you can validate what's happening and the importance of the security that you're offering to your customers through these built-in reports. And just beyond the security aspect of it, there's a lot of other good information in there about application breakdown, so you can identify things like shadow IT. You know, if you see applications that you think people shouldn't be using, you can see the breakdown of your bandwidth, what's consuming the most of your bandwidth in terms of users or applications. You can see what the web activity is. People are using peer-to-peer. So if you have a guy choking your network because he's downloading torrents at work and nobody have found out because he has his own office and nobody goes in there, well, guess what? They're gonna find out now. So there is a ton of other benefits just beyond what I talked about that I want to cover a little bit. One of them is high availability. So I am a very big fan of how easy it is to set up high availability with Fortinet. All you need essentially is what I have pictured here. You do need a switch in front, a layer 2 switch, the 2 models of FortiGate, and then obviously you would have a switch behind for the network in the way that you would normally do if you had a simple FortiGate. And all you have to do to enable high availability is just, there's a menu where you go on HA, usually it's on standalone mode, you change that to high availability, and you choose either active passive or active active. I am a big fan of active active because you can choose 2 smaller models and combine, they would give you the throughput at bandwidth of a bigger model. And because in HA you have to license all the devices the same, to me, active-active is a better value proposition. And you can set up active-active in an environment where already you have one FortiGate in place. And yes, you can also have an HA where the switches themselves are, you don't have to do it. Okay, let me back up. You don't have to use 40 switches to do HA. Those are the icons that I had. And for the switch that's down here, this switch could also, you could double up on this switch as well. And the switch can also be, you can have 2 switches. So you would have connections from each of these 40 gates to each of the switches, essentially, setting up even more redundancy. Okay, so making a mesh. There are a ton of different options. These are some of the most popular ones. So this is your traditional, mesh setup. So if you want to go cableless with your APs, you can have, in this environment, you have a FortiGate, and then you have 3 APs. You have one that's the root, and then the other ones are the leaf APs. And then you use one frequency for the mesh traffic, and the other frequency to offer Wi-Fi to the clients. And then this here is going cableless on a budget. That's what I call it. Essentially, you have that shoestring budget deployment. You have a 40 Wi-Fi, and then they grew a little bit and they want to do wireless. So, or you just can't get cables to where the wireless where the APs are. So you can set up a mesh where the 40 Wi-Fi, because it has an antenna, can be the root of the mesh network. And then finally, you can create bridges. So again, if you're in a scenario where you can't get the cables to where your switches are for the users that you want them to be wired, you can use the 40 APs to create that bridge. And at the same time, that same 40 AP can offer Wi-Fi access to the clients at this location where both the Wi-Fi and the connected users would be. And finally, SD-WAN is a very big thing for Fortinet this year. As a matter of fact, I have been told by Fortinet that I have to mention the words SD-WAN in every episode I do from now until the end of time. So I don't know if we have any of those folks in attendance today, but SD-WAN. Seriously though, so I get asked the question a lot about what is Fortinet's play in SD-WAN, right? The play is very simple. Consolidate technologies with SD-WAN by doing it all in one box, right? And I kind of put some of the way that people were doing it previously. So you have essentially this first scenario where maybe you had the one ISP and then you got a second one and you got a different appliance. So these two are inspected differently, and then you have the SD-WAN device behind that. I mean, that's definitely not a good approach from a cost perspective. And then you have the other approach where you did think about it, or you did get both ISPs at the same time, but here you're exposing your SD-WAN device, right? And then you have the security appliance behind that. So, I mean, if you're able to do both security and SD-WAN well, and I personally believe that Fortinet can, consolidation is always better. And that is the reason why they were recently awarded all of the Equinix SD-WAN business. And if you don't know who Equinix is the company that bought all of Verizon's data centers when Verizon decided to get out of the data center and take that money and invest it into 5G infrastructure. So now Equinix owns all of those, including the NAP of the Americas, I think in Virginia, and I know for a fact the one down here in Miami. And they decided to award their SD-WAN business to Fortinet. And another point is doing SD-WAN at the edge is better because then your entire infrastructure has the benefit of SD-WAN, as opposed to internally doing it just for a specific application. That means that only that application is benefiting from SD-WAN. So, I mean, I don't know why people ask me a question, but I ask me a question a lot. So my answer is that. Okay, so here's some bundle recommendation examples. There is really no right or wrong here. These are just some of the bundles I put together. That's some of the ones that we most commonly offer. So you got for your small, usually you will go with the UTM bundle. And the main difference to me between the UTM and enterprise bundle in terms of usability of the features that are included is the security rating. So the security rating is essentially this score that Fortinet has for every appliance. And it gives you the score based on the inspection of the appliance against what they have, their golden score. But it also gives you recommendations on how to fix some of the things where you lost points. So essentially, it helps you harden the FortiGate. And a lot of those score metrics are based on compliance metrics. So for larger bundles, I would recommend, or for larger branches and larger projects, I definitely recommend the enterprise bundles. Some of the smaller ones, they would be okay probably with UTM. And then the medium ones, you guys kind of have to feel the conversation and, present it, obviously. And then ultimately, the customer will make that decision based on what they think is more important to them. So for small branches, we have the 30E, FortiGate or FortiWi-Fi, the 40, and in any deployments where you're doing the traditional FortiGate plus a switch and AP, I would start choosing the 40 because it's the F series, it's a lot faster from a longevity standpoint. It's a better device that's going to allow for more future growth for the customer. Medium bundles, 40F or 60F for dedicated firewalls, and 40 Wi-Fi 60E if you need a 40 Wi-Fi model. And then the switches, 8-port or 24-port, and then 221 AP. The 221 AP, I think it's awesome for small, medium deployments. I have a couple, both in the lab and at home, and they are fantastic. And then for enterprise bundles, you have 60 or 100F, 24-port, or in the larger deployments, 48-port switch, and 221E, 231E, and the 421E. So essentially, this last two models, you get tri-radio or 4x4 MIMO antennas. So they just give you a little bit more oomph on more dense, larger environments. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the slide here and actually switch to the environment. So when sizing up a FortiGate, first thing you gotta ask is, what's your ISP throughput, right? You know, and you calculate that with the download plus the upload. So that's one of the very first questions. Another very important question that you could probably get away with not asking it in very small deployments, but anything other than that, you should ask. And that's the sessions. You should try to find out what the sessions are, because there are limits on the amount of concurrent sessions for some of these desktop models. So Fortinet has really improved on the performance throughput because the hardware is just getting so much better. But the sessions, there are differences in the sessions. So that's the one thing that I would be careful about, to make sure you don't undersize the FortiGate that way. All right, so segmentation. Let's talk about segmentation. So when we talk about segmentation, we're talking about, number one, you come to your interfaces and you break down those interfaces in any way you want. So here you have, so initially I had just this one LAN switch with all the ports. So essentially, if you want to break this apart, all you do is you click on it. You see all these ports here. You start deleting the ones you don't want. And then when you hit OK, right, then they will be here in standalone. And then you just create a new interface, right? Call it a hardware switch. And then you put those ports in there. And what you've just done, and of course, you know, you set up the HCP, right? And what have you done? Well, you created, out of the internal ports of the FortiGate, you created two switches, one with 5 ports, another one with 4 ports. No, have to be 100F, 100F, 100E, 100E. Same model, same firmware, same licenses. Please remember that. So that is step number one. And then step number two is you create the policies for all of those interfaces. And you know, what did I say about multiple interface policies? I guess I don't follow my own advice. So if you have something like this and you want to separate or undo this, right? All you have to do here is copy, paste above or below. And then now you have an identical policy above or below, right? And you just open it and then you take out all of but one, right? And then you repeat that process for all the interfaces until you have a policy for each interface. Because in reality, most of the time, you're gonna be inspecting traffic in different ways. All right, so let's talk about managed Wi-Fi. So this is 100F, but if you look at the interfaces, let me look at the ones that are actually, why is there Wi-Fi interfaces here? This FortiGate doesn't have Wi-Fi. And that is because there is an AP connected to a switch that is connected to this FortiGate. And that is why the wireless interfaces appear here. And this is what I was talking about. Every time you create a wireless interface, let's take a look at this one, for example. Okay, so in this particular interface, I chose to secure devices using address. So what am I doing here? Number one, I changed this to block. So if it doesn't know the MAC address of the device, it's not going to assign an IP. And the way that you change that is by right-clicking, and you can change that. Number two, this is kind of a convenience feature for me, so that the devices always get the same IP. I reserve the IPs. And essentially what I'm doing here is that only my phone and my laptop can connect to this Wi-Fi. No one else is going to get an IP. And by the way, on the topic of phones, did you guys know that newer Android devices have a feature that you can randomize the MAC? I did not know that until recently. So yes, that is a feature that you can actually change on a per SSID connection. So essentially, if you're connecting to SSID 1, you can choose under the settings in your phone to use a randomized MAC for that SSID. If you're connecting to SSID 2, then you can choose for that Wi-Fi to use the actual phone MAC address. So if you were going to set up an environment where you're going to be using device addresses to secure that environment, keep in mind that if there are some, I don't know if iPhone does it too. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't tell. But I know Android does it, and there is a lot of Android devices out there. So make sure you take a note of that. So what's happening here is if I go to monitor and I go to Wi-Fi client, you can see that the device is Galaxy Note 10, which is my phone. Why is that bold and black like that? Well, because in addresses, there is an address that is Galaxy Note 10. And essentially, the quickest way to do this is you set up the environment, you connect all the devices, you go to FortiView source, and then you click on what you can see, and then device address. Now is a known MAC. And then you can use it for authentication. That's one way. The other way, and I'm going back to interfaces, is through user groups. So down here, again, Wi-Fi settings. So here we have security mode captive portal. These are my options. So this is the email collection I talked about. This is disclaimer plus authentication. Authentication portal is local. And then user groups. So if you highlight it, you can see that I created 3 users and I made a user group with those 3 users. So I don't have to add all the 3 users separately, right? So how do you do that? Right here. So user and user groups. You create users, username, password, you add them to a group, and then you use that to secure the network. So I'm actually going to switch networks on my phone. So now we have this guy. But why doesn't it say Galaxy Note 10? Because on my phone, for this Wi-Fi, I'm using a randomized MAC, which means that it's a different MAC address. It's a fake one that the phone randomly generates. So it's not the same device. So think about the applications for this. You know, you can separate your, if you have a project and people just want to do Wi-Fi, which is fine, you know, you can separate first the guests from the internal users, and you can lock down the internal users using device address. You can then make another SSID for IoT and lock that down using device address. And then you can create a guest Wi-Fi. And if you really want to lock that down, you can ask them, hey, how many guests do you normally have? Oh, we have about 15. You create 15 users, you give each of them, you can even give each of them the same password, and you tell them here, when you have visitors, you give them one of these username and logins and they can log in, or you can have it open and just collect emails, put ads on there to promote your business and what have you. And there is, I think, one more thing. Oh, this. So how to prevent lateral movement within the Wi-Fi clients in the same SSID. You come to your interfaces for that SSID and you click this button right here. Bam. Now they cannot see each other. So just that easy. All right. So we only have a few minutes left. So let's talk about switch management. First and foremost, FortiLink interface. This is how you enable that management. All you have to do here is select the port that you're going to plug the switch to. Once you plug it in, you authorize it in this screen. And then there's going to be a lot of VLANs that are going to be pre-built. These are all pre-built actually, except for this one. So here's where you create your VLANs or modify the existing. And here's where you assign those VLANs to all the ports. And then later you're going to be able to see devices that are connected to each port and the VLANs subsequently, right? So this is your VLAN, device detection. You see this button right here? This is the other easy button that I wanted to highlight today. So have you guys ever heard of private VLAN, where you take a VLAN and you make it into sub VLANs, and then if you make it an isolated sub VLAN, then they can get to the gateway and to the internet, but they cannot get to other devices? That's what this is, and it's just a toggle switch. I mean, if you have to do private VLAN on a switch, that usually involves CLI, and it's a little bit more involved. Here, you just turn that on. So if you turn that on, even if you don't make any segmentation policies, the clients still cannot see one another. So if you have a switch and on port 1, you have a computer, on port 2, you have a NAS. They're on the same VLAN, so I can access my NAS. That's awesome. I turn this on, I can no longer access my NAS. That's what that is for. That's an easy button for that. You can do the same thing on these interfaces as you can do with wireless interfaces. You can actually have a captive portal, and you can have the access only for user groups. So same app, it doesn't matter essentially if the interface is wired or wireless, the protection level is still great. So then we have FortiCloud. We've spoken extensively about FortiCloud in the past. I'm not really going to waste too many minutes on that. I do want to touch on some of these reports that you can get. You can send this stuff to your clients so that they can see what's going on in their network. You can send this stuff to your staff. So if you're managing remotely, you can make changes to maximize bandwidth. This is the Cyber Threat Assessment Report. So it talks about user productivity as well as cybersecurity metrics. And then essentially all you have to do is under analysis, reports, schedule, weekly, daily, whatever, and then type the email address that you want to send it to. So pretty simple, right? Does the button make sure that there's still a fully functional trunk port available? Yes, you're still, the uplink still works because if you go to ports, you set up that FortiLink, right? So it knows that it exempts this port because that's where the FortiGate is. I'm sorry, not that one. Where is it? Oh, here, see that FortiLink? So it knows that this port is exempt from all of that, from that access VLAN thing that we did. Okay, so resources, our brands. These are our next episodes. Before you guys go, I want to talk a little business because we've talked a lot of tech. So right now, number one, there's a promo for authorized and silver level partners. And by the way, you guys may have received the email from Fortinet that they're changing the way that their partner levels are called. I actually haven't even had time to really review that, so I'm not going to put that on you guys today. So we're going to call it authorized and silver level for now, and then we'll deal with that later. So for example, the 40F, the price to you guys usually is about $1,500 with licensing. So then if we take into account 20% discount for authorized partners, that brings it down to $1,170 or so. Minus the promo, which is $275, that brings it down to roughly just under $900 for 3 years plus shipping. So that's $900, 3 years, $300 a year, $25 a month, your price. So if somebody tells me that they can't get their customer to buy on, I don't know, let's just say you add another $25, $50 a month for enterprise level security, I tell them you're not trying hard enough, because that's peanuts. $50 a month for the 40F. 60F, same scenario, $35 for you guys. So let's call it 70, or maybe you make a little less on that one. So $60 a month. 3 years of enterprise level protection, licensing. The only thing in this scenario is you have to pay for it upfront. So let's say you don't want to do hardware as a service. Hardware as a service, you pay little by little, they pay little by little. Your cost for the 40F, 36 month, $25.81. So it's about the same. For the 60F, it's about $36 a month for you guys. So it's about the same thing. And now you don't even have to buy the unit up front. And then after 3 years, you buy it out for $1. So you don't have to return the car like in a lease, right? You get that unit, you keep it, you use it for R&D, you use it for demo, you put it in another client that has even less budget, because this unit is still going to be really good in 3 years. By the way, I mean, if you look at the bandwidth of the internet in most places, I'm still getting the same bandwidth that I was getting like 5 years ago. People who today are using 80 or 100 megabits per second to do their business, and they're doing it effectively, they don't need more speed if their business doesn't change. So a lot of these devices, you can reuse for a long time. Just need to renew the license, basically until end of life and end of support. Okay, so that is all I have for today. I hope that you guys learned a little bit. If you learned just one new thing, then that's good enough for me. And if you have more questions, please let us know. Let me know. We're here to help. Remember about our staging and pre-configuration offerings, because that saves a lot of time and a lot of money for a lot of our partners. So if you're thinking about embracing hardware as a service, and guys, if you're going to be successful with hardware as a service, you need to believe in it. If you don't believe in it, you're not going to aggressively market it to your customers. So it starts with you guys believing in it. So get on the train. So please join us for the next episodes. Thank you so much for your time today. And everybody have a nice weekend.